Hello, welcome to Sehmel Homestead Park, one of the just most beautiful Penmet Park properties. We are here today. I'm Rachel.
I'm Stina.
And we're going to be exploring the wetlands. And we thought we would start up here at the pavilion. That's this building behind us. It's a great place to overlook and see a lot of the wetlands. So let me flip this around so that you can see kind of where this wetland is going to be pulling its water from. So we can see the actual water down below. Lots and lots of plants, and you can probably hear there are so many birds.
And there's people walking around. This is a great place to come with your family for some nice outside socially distant time. So we'll try and avoid them as best as possible. But yeah, the birds have been going wild.
They're very loud. We were like telling them to be quiet because we have to start a video, but they weren't listening. That's nature for you. Well, another reason we wanted to start our video here is because built into this property here is a rain garden. And a rain garden is specifically designed to get water not to travel across the surface, but to go down in. And things are looking a little sad right now. It is kind of winter, but everything is ready to kind of spring forth as soon as we get some warmer temperatures and a lot more sunlight. But basically, this is just a garden that is planted in a depression. So it's kind of sunken down, and it's designed to capture water from the surrounding environment. So from the parking lots and the grass around here, as well as from the building itself, the water is going to flow in here. And then these are plants that are very tolerant of being in the water, and they actually help to drive that water down underground. You can see here there is a drain for overflow for those times of year when we're just getting so much rain that the rain garden can't hold it all. So it can flow out somewhat. This park also utilizes something pretty neat. A lot of the pavement here is what's called permeable pavement. This is pavement that is, again, designed and engineered to get water to flow down through it rather than across the surface. And a lot of the parking spaces are permeable pavement as well.
I'd be curious, for those of you tuning in right now, maybe in the comments you can let us know where you're watching from. And also, if do you have a rain garden in your background, or maybe permeable pavement in your driveway? That might be some fun additional information to share with us as we go along.
All right, well, I think we should head down the path a little bit and take a look and get closer to that wetland. So we'll just walk on down the path. As we go, we're also going to be looking for signs of spring, because we're getting to that time of year when everything is about ready to just burst forth with life. And we'll try to talk about that as we can. One thing that's interesting about this property, and that I'm going to show you right here, is this was originally a homestead, and there were several ornamental plants that kind of decorated the property, and we have a couple of snowdrops here. This is one of the earliest flowering buds, and there's this little kind of stand of them. There's also some primroses back in here from long ago landscaping, which is kind of cool. Or also
Little like sheep, soft-eared sheep.
they do kind of look like sheep. Super cute. There's also a number of fruit trees. I think this is a plum tree here.
A sign of spring.
Yeah, a sign of spring.
There's some little buds on the end. So I was listening to the radio this morning, and now is the time to prune things like your roses.
Prune before they get leafed out. Otherwise, the poor plant puts all that energy into their growth, and then you cut it off. You want to cut them back beforehand. Here is one of my favorite native plant species here in the park. This is called lupin. And what I love about it is when it rains, these leaves are hydrophobic. You can kind of see right here. And the drops will sit right on top. Super adorable.
Cute.
So they just kind of repel water, which is, I don't know why they do that. It's just a feature of lupins.
So like green versus the more purple.
Yeah, the purple, it happens because of sun stress. So as these plants newly emerge, they need protection from the UV rays, and quite often are red or purple, which is nice. And this is a perennial flower. They have beautiful purple flowers that'll come out in the summertime.
These are the ones, they have like the spring-loaded seed pods,
Yes,
right?
explosive seeds.
Yeah. At some point we'll do a wetland walk where we talk about more about seed dispersal. Now, there's not as many seeds, so
No,
we'll save that for later.
But this path right here has tons of lupins. They're really, really beautiful. And we'll walk down to the wet part of the wetland. The area that we're in now is called the riparian zone. It's kind of the area on either side of the places where the water collects. And there's lots of life to be seen here, but I want to just show off just how full this wetland is right now at this time of year. It's been a pretty moist winter so far with lots and lots of rainfall. So we've got a nice full basin here. Love it. Good to see. One question we get asked a lot is what's with the nest box there? And that is home for hopefully a wood duck. Wood ducks are tree nesters, and unfortunately most of the wood duck homes have been kind of commandeered by European gray squirrels. And so the ducks don't have a place to be.
I like noticing that it's on that metal pole, which is
Yes,
harder
hard for squirrels.
to climb.
Easy for a duck who can just fly right in. Oh, check this out. This is one of my favorite things. I love mosses. Look at just the bright, bright color of that moss there. Growing in the end of this fence post where a little bit of moisture collects. Love that. Everything seems fairly kind of drab and brown right now, but you come back in 2 weeks or 2 months and everything will be exquisitely green. What are you noticing, Stina?
The lichen.
Oh, you know I like a lichen. Nice. Yeah, I'm noticing back here on this tree, there's a ton of lichen. One kind of fun thing that you can do this time of year is try to identify some of the plants. The trees have different colors of bark. So these cottonwoods are kind of these whitish ones. They also tend to be more tall than they are wide. Let me see if I can find a nice... the alders are in here too. So the alders are noticeable because they have these catkins that kind of hang down. So there's two kinds of cones on these trees. The female cones, which are the more woody type cones, and then these longer ones are the male pollen producing cones.
Kind of, the willows.
Yeah, the willows that are kind of
yellow.
orangey yellow. Over there is a good, right back there is a nice orangey willow. And you can see a lot more up on the hillside there. Kind of fun. Also noticing some of these reeds are kind of coming up. These look like iris plants. Yeah, so you're right. The lichen, the presence of a wide variety of lichen is indicative of good air quality. Lichen cannot tolerate polluted air. So if you see lots of lichen, that's a good thing. Ooh, the sounds of these birds are just incredible right now. And I can hear one very distinctive call of the red-winged blackbird. I wish I had the capabilities to zoom in on one,
Yeah.
but it's just not going to happen. But right up there,
I'm pretty sure there's one at the top of
way
that
up there is one.
tree. Kind of like, what is it? I don't know.
It's kind of metallic sounding at the end, like, but they are definitely a wetland species. One of the critical benefits that wetlands provide is habitat for lots and lots of species. So I'm also hearing a lot of robins and small little songbirds, chickadees and nuthatches, and who knows what else. They're really hard to identify when they're 50 yards away. But let's listen for a moment.
And then, I mean, you can also hear the cars and the planes and kind of that human influence, which is why a wetland like this is so important, because all of the things we do in the upland zone, when that water moves and picks up that pollution, the plants in this area can hopefully do some of that filtration before that water moves out to places like the Puget Sound.
Yeah, here's a good overflow drain showing the water is going to be coming down from up above and then filtering out straight into the wetland. And then the plants here are going to do a pretty remarkable job of cleaning and filtering this water. And there's a ton of variety of plants here. This one is called rush. And rushes have round stems that are kind of hollow a little bit. There's also some mint family plants here, like peppermint grows here, and nettles are another mint family. Then we've got things like sword ferns and Oregon grape, holly. Yeah, lots of holly back in there.
Dandelions.
Yeah, I just saw a flowering dandelion. Oh, there you go.
Also a good time to just remember that while you might be opposed to having dandelions in your yard, this is some of the first food for bees who are coming out of hibernation.
Those pollinators, if they wake up early, they need food.
So leaving that for them to have a little snack is a nice something you can do to help our important pollinators.
Here's a great look at this kind of orange barked willow. It is really pretty coloration that grows on them. Yeah, willows, very pretty. Here's a nice kind of vantage point of what is now a creek, although this does not flow all year round. So when the watershed has got enough water in it for it to gather and then flow down, it's going to go straight into that wetland there. At other times, it may just be swampy ground as the water goes largely underground, or it may dry up altogether.
I've never had a child fall off this bridge while doing a field trip. Never.
Uh-huh. Why don't I believe you? That's so strange. It's a good story to tell. You wouldn't think you'd need to tell children to stay on the bridge and don't jump off the edge, but...
I'm noticing, of course, all this Himalayan blackberry, which is our invasive, very pokey, but delicious
non-native
species.
And this species does incredibly well here, especially in the wet ground that's moist all year round. The seeds are pretty tiny if you've ever had a blackberry. Each berry has, 40, 50 seeds. They're itty bitty. And any place they land where it's going to be moist for a little bit of time, they will sprout and grow. They also spread by runners. And these large arching canes at the end, if they touch the ground again, will root and just start a whole new plant. And then the old canes, these down here, continue to be kind of a barrier for a lot of wildlife as well. Large things like deer aren't going to have a problem pushing through that, but some of the smaller mammals might have trouble. And I know I have trouble walking through blackberry infested areas for sure. But they'll just grow straight up on the other plants. And now we're in kind of the meadow habitat of the Homestead Park here. This big, wide, grassy area is home to tons and tons of species of wildflowers and various grasses, all of them each playing a role for cleaning and purifying water and preventing erosion. Though this is a different habitat than the forested areas of the wetland, this is still pretty critical and good habitat for a lot of the smaller mammals. So things like moles and voles, little rodents, and then tons and tons of insect species would be calling this area home as well. All of it important for... Yeah, these are mole holes. Moles are pretty territorial because they're eating insects, and so there's only so many insects that can support a population. And so if you see a bunch of moleholes, they're generally only from one animal. Yeah, which is kind of cool. I always like to point out the cow statues over there. These are sort of an homage to the original purpose of this piece of property. There was a number of cows here, which is kind of great. Oh, this is a fun plant. This is a freshly planted madrona. And madronas, especially when they're young, have these little tiny little bristles up and down their stems. And then as this plant grows and gets more woody and hard, it'll develop kind of a brown papery bark, kind of a mahogany color. What do you see, Stina?
Like that papery.
Yeah, just starting to come out. So nice to see. Madronas love to be in the sun, but they need the shelter of other trees. So they quite often grow kind of at the edges of forests. You can see one right there, right at the edge of that stand of trees up there. And they don't have the typical straight vertical growth like other trees. They kind of contort and follow the light quite a bit. So let's check in on this side of the wetland. See what we can see. This is a great place to observe some waterfowl, although it's a little early for some of the species that would be breeding here. Let's see. So there's the pavilion up there where we started our walk. So we've kind of come all the way around this pond here. Interesting. Oh, this is a cherry tree right here. You can't tell, but I can tell. It's a cherry tree. It's got kind of metallic bark, quite pretty.
In the water.
Yeah, sometimes, often frogs, lots of frogs and salamanders here. Oh, I wish I could show you. That's a ruby-crowned kinglet, that little tiny bird up there. They're one of my favorites. And they are adorable. Are you going to come over here? Probably not. But they are just so tiny. Little insect-eating birds. This is actually interesting. We can talk about this. You can see how this is an area where the leaves have fallen. And there are kind of these piles of debris. All fairly equally spaced. These are from earthworms. So earthworms will grow in an area and can remove quite a bit of organic material, and they kind of stretch out and drag it back to their home. So right in the center of here is where there's an earthworm, and there's tons of them. You can kind of just see, it looks like there's just been piles made of the deciduous leaves. And they make it quite hard for grass to grow, actually, because they will just harvest it. But yeah, you can see there's one, and there's one, and there's one, and there's, 300 of them. All right, let's walk and explore a little bit of the forest habitat. That's one of the beautiful things about this location is you can experience both the wide open spaces of the meadow as well as the more shadowed areas of the forest, which is always pretty fun to see. And this park does a great job of maintaining their trails and making sure that they are passable year-round. You might have to deal with a couple of muddy puddles occasionally, but after all, it is a wetland, so that's to be expected. Wear your boots.
Look for tracks.
Wear your boots. Yeah, tracks. Ooh, who's been here? Dogs.
And runners.
It is always fun to practice being a detective and look for what evidence of animals you can find. Any good tracks over here?
There's some good paws.
Oh yeah, lots of paws. These are some big dogs. So you can kind of always tell when you transition away from the wetland because you'll generally go uphill a little bit. And as we do that, we can get into this more forested area. Right here above us, we've got a big leaf maple that does not have its big leaves yet. There's a few little remains of their seed pods from last year that didn't quite fall, but soon this will be totally leafed out with some really, really big leaves. Next to it, we've got some really good animal habitat in this snag, which is the word for a dead tree that's still standing. Just a vertical log at this point, but lots of holes punctured through it.
I like sometimes when you, because like unless you are constantly going like looking from the trunk up to the top, you might not notice it's a snag. But if you see a tree that has mushrooms on it,
Yeah.
that's a good clue to look up, and you'll most likely see that it's not a full tree, it's some sort of dead tree, because mushrooms are decomposers, and so they're going to be most present on things that are decaying. So
Love it.
I don't see a lot of mushrooms on this one yet, but
some more signs of spring. You can see these kind of fresh new growth of these little plants that are coming out and emerging now that we're getting a little bit more daylight. Oh yeah, that is one of my favorites. This is a lichen.
I think
It's
this
called
just
Lungwort.
fell out of the
Yeah, probably the last windstorm we had.
nice green piece.
So this is lungwort. It's a type of lichen, which is a symbiosis between algae and fungi, which is just wild. This is one of the few lichens that's actually like bright green compared to the others that are kind of more off seafoam kind of green.
Yeah, this one's definitely,
It needs a
little
rehydrated.
crispy. It's starting
Needs
to
a rain.
But yeah, that brighter green over here is what we're.
Yeah, these branches of big leaf maple, when they fall from the tree, are covered in life. And we've got this right here. This is a moss, a very small plant. Right next to it is a liverwort. And the main difference when looking at them is the liverworts have leaves that overlap. So this is liverwort here. You can see those. They almost look scaly, whereas the moss is more fluffy. Both of them very small organisms lacking a water transport system, so they stay small and live in moist places.
Unidentified blob of goo.
Cool. Eggs? I don't know. Mushroom? Who knows? Need to bring your little magnifier when you come.
A dirty slug.
Yeah, could be anything. A little ball of goo is, who knows what it could be.
Primordial soup.
Oh, here's a good example. I can show you the native
Yeah, that's next time.
Oregon grape here, which has these little kind of spines here and deeply serrated leaves compared to the holly, which has even more deeply serrated and very spiky leaves. So the Oregon grape is a native, is an important species. The holly is introduced. We've got lots of holly around here.
Another nice native species that we're talking around is
Oh yes,
the
the good
blackberry.
blackberries.
Yeah, so this is our native species of blackberry here. It trails along the ground, hence sometimes it's called the trailing blackberry.
Yeah, and it comes to fruit much earlier than the Himalayan blackberries. So June, thereabouts, is when these berries bring out their fruits, and they're delicious, by the way. This is a really fun species of moss. It's very, very
I
squishy.
want to do a taste test.
Oh, you want to taste test the blackberries?
Blackberries, yeah.
You'd have to freeze them, and they're not ready at the same time.
Another thing I know, like on field trips, we like to point out is just how much quieter it gets as you kind of get into the more forested habitat. So engage all your senses when you're out and about and notice the sounds and the smells, which I guess I still hear some cars because now we're close to a road.
We're close to the road, but there's
definitely more
less
muted.
and less birdsong here in the thickly forested area compared to that wetland habitat we were in before. So got a couple of downed branches here. Have some conifers. I love that the color on the underside and the top side are slightly different. They do more photosynthesis on the top, of course, so more pigment there. All right, let's go walk and check out this tree here, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. This is a great example of just a beautiful western red cedar. This is a species that lives for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. They have these great kind of buttressed stumps that reach kind of outward, and they're very wide. And this is a species that does not mind having its feet wet. So they can live in a floodplain or in a zone like that and do just fine. And they're kind of characterized by these J-shaped branches. They kind of swoop down and then go up a little bit at the end. And the needles overlap and form kind of these flattened blades. And because it's spring and we're just getting the new growth, they're always brighter green at the tips where their growth is active. Super cute to find. And they smell really good. So this is one that's very aromatic. Cedar is very resistant to rot and insect damage, so it's a very useful wood here in the Pacific Northwest. If you're gonna make a deck, you're gonna want it to be out of cedar.
I've also seen videos of Native American women, I guess and men, anyone.
Yeah.
They'll collect the bark.
Yeah.
And they can like.
So the bark is very fibrous and is incredibly useful for making all kinds of goods. It can be woven very easily. It can be sort of fluffed up and even used for like a diaper type material. It's really absorbent and soft and very pretty. Yeah. All right, and we'll just compare that tree to this one here, which has really big, deeply chunky bark, straight limbs, and then needles and cones. This is the Douglas fir. Oh yeah, you gotta find the cones. Oh yeah.
The little mouse butt.
Totally looks like a mouse butt. Little tail and two hind limbs of the mouse hanging out there. Love it.
Doug fir for sure.
Love it. All right, so usually this time of year I can find evidence of the little Douglas squirrels that love to eat those cones, but of course, now that I mentioned it, I'm not finding them. But this is a great place for us to kind of wrap up our walk here. Thanks for tuning in with us and exploring the wetland and getting to know some of our plants and bird species around. You'll want to come back to this park in a couple of months and see how things have changed. So if you can get out, I definitely recommend that. There's tons of parking. You can park far away and keep your distance from people and play it safe. Thanks for tuning in with us. Thanks to Penn Met Parks for hosting us out here. We love this place. Lots of wildlife, and we love to see our waterways protected like this.
Yeah. Nothing better than a wetland for protecting our water quality, especially in a place where most of our pollution does come from stormwater. So wetlands are so important. Maybe you'll turn your yard into a wetland too. Could be a fun summer project.
Or at the very least, a rain garden. There you go.
Yeah.
So if you support the work that we do here in the forest as well as along the shores of the Salish Sea, you can always support our efforts through a financial contribution on our website, harborwildwatch.org. Or if you can't do a financial contribution, just liking, sharing, and commenting helps to get our message out to even more people. So thanks everybody for tuning in with us. We'll leave you with this beautiful Douglas fir here.